Killing Room is a first-person roguelike shooter that released in 2016, but flew under a lot of people's radars. Killing Room was made by Alder Games and released to a very mixed set of reviews, mostly leaving it classed around 3 out of 5 stars. But was it really worth that 3 out of 5, or was it really an underrated game? Graphically, Killing Room is quite a beautiful game with a great art style that feels almost like an updated Borderlands, but with much more realistic looking graphics, which I quite like. The weapons look unique and the environments are highly detailed if you look closely. The environments don't look detailed from a distance due to the boxy nature of the game, but the textures are in fact quite well detailed. The enemies look good and the animations are generally pretty great. Like with every good mystery movie, there is at least one red herring. The Electro minigun, which has literally no reload animation and its running animation glitches out 9 out of 10 times. This is a cardinal sin in my book, as animations are one of the most important things in making a game look good, and having a weapon that is missing an animation in an otherwise perfectly animated game is like turning up to a fancy restaurant wearing nothing but your pants while everybody else is in suits and fancy dresses. Options-wise, Killing Room has just about everything you could want, from a field of view slider that starts at way too small, where I stupidly left it for nearly 30 hours of gameplay, and ends at fisheye lens. Other than that, it's got your standard array of low to ultra graphical options and a set of bog standard resolutions, as almost every game does. Story-wise, there literally isn't enough story to actually count as a spoiler, because the only story in the game is that it takes place in a TV show conveniently called Killing Room, in which poor, as in monetarily poor, contestants attempt to fight their way through the game show in order to get a massive sum of money, on the condition that they make it out alive after fighting their way through all 8 floors, which is so much easier said than done that saying I can win Killing Room to escape poverty repeatedly without breathing for the entire length of time it takes for someone to actually beat Killing Room twice would be much easier. Gameplay, however, is where Killing Room shines. The game puts you in the shoes of a randomly generated player character, who is, by the story of the game, from a poor background of some form or another. You start off with random stats and a single randomly generated boosting item. This item can range from the legendary No Pro to an item that is literally just +1 of XYZ stat, although those stats can be otherwise upgraded. To nail home the fact that your character is poor as fuck and that this is their only hope in society, they usually can't so much as aim a firearm when you first start off. Sometimes even sprinting is too much effort for your character, draining your stamina faster than you can cut out the enemy throwing icicles at you in an attempt to freeze you solid. You start off the game, at least on your first few runs, without even a crosshair or automatically reloading weapons when you empty the magazine. That does, however, change over time as you reach milestones and unlock permanent items that give you auto-reload, crosshairs and more. You always start off with a pistol, but at a certain milestone you'll also start off with a sawn-off shotgun, and there is always a submachine gun in the very first room out of the elevator on the first floor that doesn't have any monsters in it. After a certain milestone, you do also have a third weapon slot, allowing you to carry both the sawn-off shotgun and the submachine gun into the first floor. After that, you go through room after room, killing enemies and getting random things at the end of each quote-unquote chain of side rooms. These things can range from new weapons to suicide booths, among other things, which we'll come back to later. You then defeat a boss and get in an elevator to the next floor. Rinse and repeat this for 8 total floors, hoping not to get floored on your way through. After each floor, getting more powerful as you can upgrade your stats and get some guaranteed health, stroke armor, stroke lockpicks in the form of 2 points you can put into any of the 3. Earlier on I mentioned the suicide booth. It's one of a few things you can find at the end of a chain of side rooms that will assist you in some way throughout the quote-unquote game show of Killing Room. And yes, this suicide booth will help you, even if you're not suicidal. By hitting one of the 2 buttons in the suicide booth, you gain X popularity at the cost of Y chance of death. My personal choice out of the 2 is the 50 popularity for a 25% chance of death. Although that 25% is a lie, it's much closer to 0% as I've only ever died to it once and I use the booth all the time. Popularity, however, is extremely important. Popularity is something you want by the boatload, as the higher your popularity score is, the more good items you will get at the end of each level, and the more of a safety net you have for using vending machines, which cost popularity in exchange for things such as health, armor or ammo. Although vending machines can get you through fights or even floors in a pinch, they are about as reliable as a crackhead suffering withdrawal, because you often won't find the vending machine you need or have enough popularity to be able to safely use it. Saving popularity, however, grants you up to 2 items at the end of a floor, which can be any 2 positive items in the game, or if you want negative popularity, they can be any 2 negative items in the game. Speaking of items, Killing Room has a wide variety of interesting and helpful items, such as a master key that grants you endless lockpicks and power armor that increases your speed and defense. to other much more ridiculous items that are also useful in some way or another. However, there are also negative items which provide negative effects, such as the microtransactions bad item that costs you 50 in-game dollars every time you enter a side room. Thankfully, this isn't an EA game, or that would be 50 real dollars. Jumping back to popularity, there are lots of ways to gain popularity, from just entering side rooms to saving ducks to getting combo kills, so on and so forth. On the other hand, certain actions lose you popularity, such as entering any of the line of rooms towards the exit of the floor, including the boss room, or shooting the camera. Speaking of cameras, if you're willing to stream and have friends or viewers, you can have them vote for items to give you at the end of each floor. Sadly, I couldn't test this element because I have exactly 0 friends and about as many viewers as you'd expect from a channel with less subscribers than there are successful moms caught in multi-level marketing schemes. Besides popularity, you also get money to spend at the shop, which can net you extra health kits, armor, lockpicks, guns, items, so on and so forth. Although, half of it is so ludicrously expensive you'd have to saw your own left arm off just to get enough popularity to use enough vending machines to be able to afford it, assuming that many vending machines would even fit inside the floor. Enemies-wise, the game has a diverse and interesting set of enemies, ranging from snowmen to ghosts that fire ectoplasm balls at you, to piss-covered snowmen, to ghosts covered in purple dye, to floating heads that explode when killed, to many, many more that I haven't mentioned for time reasons. Most of the enemies are extremely mean looking and do a fair amount of damage if they hit you, usually 5%. But even though it's only 5%, you usually only have 40 to 60% health and maybe 25% armor most of the time, at best. And you usually don't only get hit once, you usually get hit quite a few times if you're going to get hit. There are also some enemies with ranged weapons that include icicles that slow you down enough for a sleeping turtle being pushed by a snail to catch up with you from the first floor of the map, taking the exact same path the player took. The bosses of Killing Room are, as far as I've managed to get, pretty well designed and generally quite fun to fight, with most of them having obvious strategies as to how to beat them. Such as the third boss, a giant worm that pops up to scream at you, or bite you if you get a little bit too close, allowing you to shoot into its mouth and deal damage. It does this a few times before it goes back underground, dropping off a few smaller worms for you to fight on its way down. Then it does a little pop-up act signaled by sand particles before it goes back to screaming at you. Rinse and repeat until you or it dies of boredom or bullets. Speaking of bullets, you can never get enough of them. But on a different note, the gunplay in this game is unique to say the least. When you start out, your character can't hit the broadside of a barn with a shotgun, rocket launcher, or even a minigun, no matter how close you get to the broadside of said barn. At least, that's how it feels. You can, however, upgrade your accuracy as you progress throughout the game. Although, while crouching or iron sighting, your accuracy is nigh on perfect so long as your accuracy stat isn't too low, which it doesn't start off as such. The weapons themselves tend to feel fairly punchy, although don't tend to sound as powerful as they feel, excluding the sawn-off super shotgun that sounds like a drum kit getting hit by a train when you fire it. Even the pistol in this game though has enough visual recoil to make real tank cannons jealous, and the melee weapons offer a great risk-reward situation where every kill gives you popularity, but you're at more risk of taking damage because you're in much closer proximity to the enemies. Changing the topic just a little bit, there is one more thing you have to look out for in every room besides the enemies. Traps. There are a handful of types of traps, the most prevalent being spiked tiles and bear traps. The spiked tiles exclusively deal damage while the bear traps lock you in place, requiring you to look down and press the use key repeatedly to open them and free yourself. However, after you do free yourself, the bear trap will be completely disabled. On the topic of traps, there are entire rooms of traps with a unique symbol marking them. These rooms come in many different forms, from simple mazes to parkour over spike pits while dodging a spinning axe. There is also one other kind of main side room you may encounter, a puzzle room, which requires you to do something such as flip a switch exactly 25 times to reveal the combination to the safe and allow yourself to pass through, or input pi as the code to the safe. These puzzles generally aren't too hard and grant an okay reward most of the time. The one I hate is the search all boxes puzzle, which is nigh impossible to beat. The last thing to note before I move on from talking about the gameplay is the brutal difficulty. Killing Room comes with a nasty difficulty curve that seriously ramps up as you go from floor to floor, even though it's difficult on the first floor. Not to mention that you get about as much ammo as you can fit in your pockets while naked to get you through the entire game, although the pistol does have an endless ammo pool. Glitches wise, Killing Room has a few, but not too many and none that are game breaking as far as I can tell. Scratch that, after writing most of this script and going back for one last play to do any emergency updates to the script, the game crashed while trying to enter the final floor on my best run ever. But this is the only crash I've ever had, so I can let it slide as a Unity engine issue, as the engine does tend to have crashing issues in quite a few games. However, the majority of the glitches are minor physics engine issues that are common with the Unity engine. The only thing to mention is that the game tends to stutter like a game reviewer confronted with a social situation when trying to load into some of the harder rooms with more monsters, although this generally only lasts about the first 5 seconds before the game returns to running properly. This also does seem to happen in rooms with 20 plus enemies including a boss in it. To conclude, Killing Room is an interesting and fun game with a somewhat unique concept and decent execution. Its glitches are minimal and the gameplay is quite fun and fairly immersive, although brutally difficult. As for whether it's worth your money, for the current price of £7 on the Steam store, I would say it is worth your money, as I've easily had 25 hours of fun gameplay out of Killing Room. Not to mention that this game will run fine on just about any gaming PC since 2010. Thanks for watching, I have been your host, Vert343, signing off. Peace out, gentlemen.